Why hello there and welcome back to Some Weirdo on the Internet Reviews Obscure Role-Playing Games. And in this episode, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Albedo 2nd Edition was released in 1993 by Chessex, and as this is just an updated 2nd edition, I am really only going to be addressing how it is different from the 1st edition, so if you have not seen my review of Albedo 1st Edition, you may want to go watch that now, or you may want to just watch this video and then decide if you want to watch that one afterwards. It is really up to you. The setting has not changed, animal people in a space Cold War, so let's just jump right into the character creation. Character creation in Albedo 2nd Edition is one of the things that has undergone the most revisions, so I am just going to do another character building example, but one that is less complicated. Okay, so just for the sake of comparison, we are once again going to be making Geordie, the Warp Engineer Penguin. So first we choose our race. Penguin, obviously. The races have not changed, providing a frame size and some attribute classes. But now instead of rolling our attributes on a table, we get 40 points to buy attributes with variable cost by class. And there we go. Then we calculate derived stats. The notable thing here is that characters now start with fatigue points, which are lost when taking damage, rather than starting at 0 and gaining them when damaged. And then roll for dispositions as in the 1st edition, although they did remove the option to roll it with a d10 and only get good results. And it seems that this time he is responsible and vague. Now it's time for skills, which in the 1st edition was awful, but is now much less so. So we start by getting some basic skills, then an education background which grants some more skills, then choose 3 social and 3 movement and perception skills, then pick a career and select 1 skill package. We are then given 20 points to buy or increase skills and expertises, which are different in some way that I do not fully understand. However, now instead of buying skill training points individually or in packages, you simply have 3 levels of skill or expertise. Also, instead of having to cross-reference the skill training and governing attribute on a chart, the value for the roll is just the governing attribute, with training providing a bonus. And finally, all the other stuff: name, background, ties and antipathies, all the stuff that isn't really relevant to this example. And that was it, a much quicker and less painful experience. However, my big complaint is still that it is mentioned how certain types of animal people have certain abilities, like superior night vision or hearing, without those actually having a mechanical benefit. Actually, the entire section on player races seems almost entirely unchanged from the 1st edition, including some things that are wrong, like stating that strength is used for resisting damage and wounds, and this one really weird comment about digitigrade feet, which doesn't even really make sense within the context of either book. So character creation, 3 out of 5. All the stuff that I liked in the 1st edition is still there, like the wide selection of character races and the forced skill diversification, and they got rid of one thing that I really didn't like with the simplified skill system. Overall, the mechanics are basically the same, but with a few modifications. The core concept of comparing one value to another and then rolling on a table is still there, but now instead of using a skill level, you use just the attribute with a skill modifier. Also, in general, modifiers are now applied to the value that goes into the table instead of the roll. So that means a positive modifier is a bonus, and a negative modifier is a penalty, which is a bit more intuitive. Also now, instead of just being a simple pass-fail system, you get something called a success grade depending on how well or poorly you roll. So if you roll equal to or 1 under the target value, that is 1 success grade. If you roll 2 to 3 under, it is 2 success grades, etc., etc. And this is a really neat idea because it allows you to have the kind of tiered successes that you get in a rollover or dice pool system in a roll under system. Combat is more or less the same as it was in first edition, aside from aforementioned changes to the core mechanics, so I'm not going to cut away to a fancy illustration here. One thing that was notably changed is the way in which armor penetration is calculated. So now, instead of comparing the weapon's penetration value against the armor's penetration resistance on the table and rolling for it, you just add the weapon's penetration value to the success grade of the attack roll, and if it surpasses the armor's penetration resistance, it penetrates, and that takes an entire roll out of the overly complicated procedure of combat. There are, of course, other changes, but for the most part they are just minor tweaks, and I didn't go that in-depth into the combat in the first review, so I'm not going to go that in-depth into the changes in this review. Now, the ties and antipathies, or as I referred to them in the previous video, the numerical value of how much your character does or does not like a particular person, place, organization, concept, etc., have not really changed, and I still do not like them. And finally, experience points are now awarded at the rate of 1 per hour of play, which isn't bad or anything, it's just kinda weird. So a 2 out of 5 for mechanics. I kinda feel like I should give them something for the changes that were made, because they were good changes, but they were fairly minor and didn't do a lot to address the majority of the bloated, unnecessary rules that I found so distasteful in the first place. So overall, the content is basically the same, lots of weapons and vehicles and armor and just various miscellaneous items. One thing I did want to point out though is the addition of a world generation system, which is basically just a big ol' set of tables, because this game does somewhat heavily involve traveling around between different planets, and making up an entire planet is kinda difficult, and less difficult with all of these tables. Also, this version now only has 1 scenario included instead of the 3 that were in the first edition, and there is still a lack of NPCs, but at least they're much easier to make now. So 3 out of 3 for content. Some new stuff has been added and some old stuff has been taken away, but basically the same. Albedo 2nd Edition is now a single volume, and the layout is basically the same, but organized significantly better. The character creation and mechanics are now nicely laid out at the beginning and are much easier to follow, although weirdly a lot of the art is now line art versions of illustrations that appeared fully shaded in the first edition, which looks fine in some cases, but in others makes the art look a bit unfinished. And one specific thing that I really appreciate, all of the tables you need during play are in the sections that reference them, and at the end of the book. So 3 out of 5 for presentation, it is a lot better organized, but some of the art took a bit of a step down. And 1.5 out of 3 for writing, it is much clearer and more consistent and much more thoroughly edited, but a few things did slip through from the first edition, and some things are explained so minimally that it can be a little hard to be sure that you are fully understanding the rules. And there we have it, Albedo 2nd Edition. A better but still not good game. Like, if you had to play one of the two, this would be the better choice, but I still can't recommend either edition. There is also a 3rd edition of Albedo from 2004, but that one is a completely different system, so I would have to do a full review for it, and I doubt that I'll be doing that anytime soon, because honestly, if I'm going to review an updated version of an anthropomorphic role-playing game published by Sanguine Productions, it's probably not going to be Albedo. Alright, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit all the lovely buttons and let me know what you think of this type of review that I'm doing here. This is something of an experiment, and if people like this kind of video where I mainly address the changes made in a new edition, I might do more of them. Well, until next time.